Welcome everybody back into Nerd Sesh. As always, I'm Carson Brebbert. Alongside me is Logan Camden. And today we are going to be giving our predictions for the Pacific Division, which is without a doubt the most loaded division in basketball. And honestly, top to bottom, one of the strongest divisions that I can remember, Logan. So I'm very intrigued in how you will view these teams relative to one another. Who do you have as your favorite out of the Pacific?
My favorite in the Pacific Division is the Los Angeles Lakers. I have them going 51-31 and locking up my 2 seed in the Western Conference. And I'll go ahead and spoil it, Carson. I have the Los Angeles Lakers as my title favorite right now over the likes of Milwaukee, of Denver, of Boston, of Phoenix. I know a lot of people are taking them, but why can this team win the title, right? Why is it different from last year? Well, one thing that is similar from last year is their defensive ceiling. They've got the best defender on the planet in Anthony Davis. He held players 16%, Carson, below their average inside 6 feet in the playoffs last season. He's absurd. And I think what we saw LA do in this offseason was really add. I think they improved more than any other team in the offseason. They added a ton of talent. And I think with that talent, they have a distinct size advantage that helps them match up with teams. I think they're the best team equipped to defend Nikola Jokic and the Denver Nuggets. And I think with this size and added length, they should be able to command the boards on a real nightly basis. Roy Hachimura, Jared Vanderbilt, Anthony Davis, LeBron James, Christian Wood. You've got 2 6'4" and 6'5" guards in Russell and Reeves. And this team was third in rebounding post-trade deadline. I think that matters. But moreover, I think there should be a lot of offensive pressure alleviated off of LeBron and Anthony Davis' shoulders with the additions. Now, I want to be clear about something. LeBron and Anthony Davis have to play like top 10 players this season for them to win the title. That is a crux of the Lakers making a deep playoff run and getting this job done. And they have to be healthy. Those are still major swing factors in this. And a part of that, AD has to play great offensive basketball. The jumper is still a concern. I know you've heard Darvin Ham saying he wants AD taking 3 threes a half. That's a little ludicrous, but we are going to need to see good jump shot AD, dominant offensive beast AD for this to happen. That's still a concern. He was 32% on catch and shoot attempts last season. He was 35% on jumpers. And his passivity is a concern. We cannot have every other Davis when it comes playoff time. That's just not going to cut it. We need him aggressive in an attack mode every single night. And if you harken back, Carson, to last season, that stretch from November to December, I know we were all fired up, dude. 35, 15, and 3 a night on 64% from the field with over 2.5 blocks a night and over a steal a game. He was shooting nearly 11 free throws a night. He shot 45% on jumpers, 41% from deep. He was shooting 70% on step backs, 78% inside 5 feet. If you extrapolate that out to an entire season, that would be the second best mark in the entirety of the NBA. If we can see Anthony Davis reach that level, I mean, that is a top 5 player in the NBA, bona fide and in contention for the best player on planet Earth when you add what he does on the defensive end. If he can get back that consistent level night to night, I mean, it makes the Lakers even that more dangerous. And on the other side of that, I think LeBron also has to be locked in every single night come playoff time and will have to impose his will on the game. That was an issue in the playoffs. LeBron disappearing for portions of games, and you're going, why isn't he touching the ball? Where is he? And again, health is going to be a big concern. LeBron has played less than 67 games in each of the last 5 seasons. On average, he's playing 56 games over the past 5 seasons. He's dealt with foot and ankle issues. AD, 49 games played per season over the last 4 years. So those are concerns, and they're going to have to pull their weight, like I said, but I really think that the load shouldn't be as heavy this season. The surrounding pieces are a lot better than what they had last year. I anticipate added chemistry, dynamism, versatility, and rhythm, but it all comes down to really the spacing and the shooting to me. Carson, they have 5 of the top 30 spot-up players in the NBA this upcoming season. That's one of the things I'm most excited about. Wood, Prince, Reeves, and Russell all shot over 40% on catch-and-shoot attempts last season, all of them in the top half of the league in terms of spot-up percentiles. Hachimura, the 47th player, Wood, number 28, Reeves, number 16, and Russell, number 8. You think about what Hachimura did in the playoffs last year. He had the second highest effective field goal percentage on catch-and-shoot attempts, and he was the best spot-up player in all of the playoffs last season. Along with that, I really like the pick-and-roll creation they have with Reeves. He was 90th percentile there last season. Russell was 75th percentile there last season, and Gabe Vincent is above average there. So the recipe, I think you're looking at a team that is going to have an elite defense with elite length. I think you're looking at a great offense that is going to be much improved with the added spacing and spot-up weapons that they have this year. Again, this is dependent on the stars being great, on being healthy and balling out every night. But I think the Lakers improved more than any other team in the offseason, and they've got 2 top 10 players on the planet. If those guys play like that, pull their weight, are healthy, and the cast comes along with them, I don't see why it can't happen. I have the Lakers as my title favorites, man. If LeBron and AD show up, I think that is a reality that we could be looking at the end of this season. And to me, this feels like LeBron's final push, Carson. You know, I don't know how many good years LeBron has left, but this feels like the team that is going to be empowered to do it. And I think they've got the requisite talent to get the job done. So I'm all in on the Lakers this season, man. It's a tough task with all the new contenders we have this year, but I'm rocking with the Lakers as my title favorites this season.
Wow. I thought I was high on the Lakers, and they are my second favorite team out west when we're talking about going on a deep playoff run. I have them as my 3 seed just because I think we're going to see too many games missed from LeBron and AD in the regular season, too many games where the motor just isn't there. They're conserving their energy and protecting their bodies and whatnot. This is not a team that prioritizes the regular season, and we've seen that in the last couple years. But I do really like their formula for a playoff run, and it starts with a dominant defense that I think is the best in the league. And I feel like people totally unjustly soured on the Lakers, on their defense, and on AD as the best defender on the planet because Jokic and the Nuggets eviscerated them, which they did to everybody and they would do to anybody. I legitimately think that was a historically great offense last year. But if you look at the first 2 rounds, it was as dominant an individual defensive run from Anthony Davis as I can remember in my lifetime. And as a team, they held the Grizzlies 12 points below their regular season offensive rating and held the Warriors 5 points below their regular season offensive rating. And AD, I thought, did a phenomenal job of countering some really genius level pick and roll play from Steph Curry, affecting him in a way that no other defender on the planet could. I think he is the best defensive anchor alive right now. You mentioned holding opposing players 16% below their typical field goal percentage at the rim in the playoffs. Also blocking over 3 shots per game. It was just dominant. But I also do like the personnel around him. And I thought that we saw LeBron actually reach a pretty impressive defensive level in the playoffs, especially with some secondary rim protection and defensive playmaking. And I've been encouraged by some of the stuff that we've seen and heard from D'Angelo Russell about the defensive end of the floor. I went and watched Warriors-Lakers in the preseason, and I thought that you really saw D'Lo's defensive tools there, his 6'4" build with that really long wingspan. He's just never been engaged there consistently enough to make a reliable impact, but he's talking about how he wants to be Derek White. He wants to embrace that role, doing all the little things. I could not think of a better thing to be hearing from D'Angelo Russell. So I do think that he's trending upwards. And then you mentioned the elite size and rebounding. The front court is going to be the foundation here. Having the physicality, the length from Rui, LeBron, and AD out there. Having the lineup versatility as well to go with a defensive stalwart like Jared Vanderbilt at the point of attack. To go with maybe a 2-big look of AD and Jackson Hayes where you have this dominant rim protecting unit. They just, again, have phenomenal lineup versatility and a really great defensive foundation. And AD is such a game changer that they just don't need great point of attack defense to be a great team defense because of how much ground he can cover out of pick and roll. We saw it with the hedging against Steph. He can affect those pocket passes, and when he's in the paint, he can completely take away the rim. So that foundation is really, really promising, and I do think they have much more offensive skill than last year. Austin Reeves is a very legitimate secondary creator, 90th percentile spot-up player, incredibly skilled out of pick and roll. We talk about his change in pace, his touch shot making, his deceptiveness and craftiness, good playmaker as well. And the guy just averaged 17 and 5 on 62% true shooting in that playoff run. If you don't think Austin Reeves is legit, I don't think you're paying attention. The guy is really good, and he is good enough as a third option for this team to go on a really deep run. And then Rui's shooting improvement, I do think is real. I wouldn't expect him to replicate last year's playoffs because that was insane. But when he can be effective as a spot-up player, then he starts to become a problematic matchup as that sort of big forward who can work his way to the mid-range, who can bully smaller players when he's alongside LeBron and AD. They're just big, they're athletic, they're physically imposing. D'Lo can't possibly play worse than he did last year versus the Nuggets, so really he can only go up from here. Gabe Vincent adds more quality shooting and playmaking. Taurean Prince can shoot the lights out, really effective spot-up player, and then you get more spacing, more dynamic finishing around the rim from Christian Wood, a guy who offensively I am still very high on. So the totality of that core, I think, is significantly more skilled offensively. And again, they maintain this elite depth and lineup versatility that really nobody else can match. You have the defensive weapons like Vando and Hayes, who maybe are unplayable in certain matchups because of their offensive skill limitations, but who also can have big defensive impacts in any game. You have a uniquely skilled offensive big in Christian Wood with that pick and roll finishing, with the spot up shooting, the pick and pop shooting, his ability to attack closeouts, get to the rim, his touch from floater range. D'Lo is a guy who can explode offensively. You can play so many different ways with so many different personnel combinations, and you aren't married to any of them. If Christian Wood is getting bullied in a series, well then fine. Go with a more defensively oriented big, or just go with your normal front court of Rui, LeBron, and AD and play Jackson Hayes more minutes with the second unit. Keep Wood out of things a little bit. If D'Lo is having one of those brutal stretches where he's just settling for repeated pull-up jumpers, taking the offense out of rhythm, clanking, bring in Gabe Vincent. They have more options than anybody else in basketball, and that is valuable to me. The reason that they can't be my title favorite is because I do think the level of consistency that we saw from LeBron and AD last year was concerning. And I would expect them to be better this year, because I thought that in the playoffs, it was a really disappointing level of passivity from AD, coming off of one of the best regular seasons of his career, where we saw him just demonstrating the highest level of skilled touch shot making that he had, dominating the interior, not trying to force the issue from deep as much, which really hasn't been a viable source of offense for him since the bubble. It was this beautiful, efficient, productive AD offensively. And then during the playoffs, we saw too many nights where he disappeared on that end. And LeBron, I mean, he could pick his spots. Game 6 against the Warriors, Game 4 against the Nuggets, you see this incredible level that he could reach, but it was not nearly consistent enough. His jump shot was brutal, and he was heavily reliant on it. We didn't see him dominate the ball and create lots of offense out of pick and roll. He was most effective attacking those mismatches out of the post, just sort of using his brute force. And maybe the foot injury really hampered him there. But I think that we have to see, and after all, the guy is 39 years old. Like, you can only expect so much of him over the entirety of a playoff run. I think the reality is that he does have to pick his spots more and more. And maybe there are nights where he can look like a top 5 player, but there are going to be nights where he doesn't look like a top 10 player. It's going to be a balance between the two of them. So I just don't buy that reliable offensive dominance from those two and the automatic offense reaching those elite heights of somebody like Denver. The gap between the two of those teams offensively last year was massive, and I don't see a reason that Denver would regress. I know that they've lost Bruce Brown, but I thought they did a phenomenal job replenishing in the draft. Strother looks great, Hunter Tyson, Jalen Pickett. I honestly like all of those guys, and at the end of the day, they have Jokic and elite spot-up shooting. That's going to turn out a dominant offense. It's just so much more reliable than what LA has shown us up to this point. They were an average playoff offense, but that defensive ceiling is so special that if LeBron and AD can kick into their top gear for a playoff run, this team is going to be exceptionally difficult to beat.
No, and I completely understand those concerns, Carson, because we haven't seen it. But a few things. I think, one, this year they have the entire season to figure out a rhythm and a flow to the offense, the lineups and stuff. It was really cobbled together. At the trade deadline, you get all these new assets in, and then it's like, okay, well, let's make a playoff run. I mean, that's a tough situation to put anybody into. The concerns with LeBron and AD are still real, but again, I think that if you're looking at a team that has, they've got more help around them than any other team, arguably, in the league in terms of offense, in terms of tertiary and, just random creators off the bench. And then I do think this is the most well-equipped team, at least out west, to really defend Denver. And that's a tough task to ask anybody to stop. Yes, go out there and stop that big Serbian man. He's unstoppable. Yeah. That's not something that you can do. But they've got a lot more size this year. I think they can be really physical with the Nuggets. And again, I just think that this is the best group around these stars in terms of supporting pieces, I think, of any other team in the league. So it's not likely. And again, it's a lot easier said than done in terms of stopping Denver. That's the goal. That we can point to all this other stuff. The goal is to beat Denver because they're the top dog right now, and they're probably going to be there at the end because they've got the unstoppable formula, the recipe. But I can see it happening.
Why do you feel different about the defensive outlook versus Denver when, like, adding Jackson Hayes as a backup defensive big is great? If D'Lo's more committed, that's one thing. But the bottom line problem is that they had no answers for Jokic in single coverage, and everything that they tried, when they would dig, he would kick right out to a shooter. The Rui thing, they tried. He ended up being overwhelming there. I just don't think anybody is approaching stopping Denver.
I don't think you can stop Denver. I think Denver's a machine. I think that they can stop the runs and they can limit the bleeding a little bit more in those games where, the Lakers go through these offensive lulls and it's LeBron just going to the post or it's the offense stagnating. I think that's going to help a lot in terms of game flow. There isn't an answer for Denver. My one thing would be is you put out Vando out there a lot more. I know he has his offensive limitations. I think you go with a big lineup and you try to out-physical the rest of their lineup. Again, it's tough. AG's a big dude. Jokic is a big dude. MPJ's a big dude. I think you try to out-physical Denver as much as you can. Like I said, man, it's not a... I can't tell you how to stop Jokic. I don't think anybody can. But I want to ask you this. If you think... You're pretty high on the Lakers. We are both. If the Lakers do get it done, does Anthony Davis have to be the best player on this team? And does he have to be a top 5 player on the planet?
That's a good question. I think that the answer is probably yes to both. And I'm not sure that he has to be the best offensive player. He might. That'll just depend on what level LeBron can get to reliably. And we do know that AD can play better offensively than he did in last year's playoffs. But I don't know how we started to do this sort of retrospective, LeBron was the best player in last year's playoff run. I've seen people do that. I understand that any conversation about LeBron is going to be filled with delusion because he has like the most passionate fan base on the planet and then also some of the most passionate naysayers on the planet. But AD was so much more important that entire run because the foundation was the dominant defense, and he was the one supplying that dominant defense, single-handedly making them the best defense in the playoff field for those first 2 rounds. And he does need to take a step up offensively. And I do think he probably has to reach that sort of top 5 level that it felt like he was approaching in the first 2 rounds, even with some offensive inconsistency. And then the Jokic matchup was just really tough. And I think that he was too inconsistent offensively in that series as well. What do you think?
I think he has to completely. And I think that, no, I mean, look, point blank, if AD is not playing like a top 5 player in the playoffs, come playoff time, the Lakers aren't going to get it done. I think you're right. I think LeBron, at his apex, at his peak, can generate these amazing shots. He can do it, but it's not... That's the one thing that I want to hammer home about LeBron now is it's not 2016 to 2018 LeBron anymore. It's not every possession him going down and dictating out of the pick and roll. It's, like you said, it's him going on the low block and drawing doubles, or it's him kicking off to somebody else and playing off ball or settling for jump shots. And I just think it's the reality of LeBron at this point is that he is 39 and that he is aging and that it's really physically taxing on your body to go out and do that every night. And for a playoff run, I do think it's unreasonable to expect that out of him. So I think that AD not only has to be physically imposing and attacking bigs and getting down there in the low block and going to work and getting to his spots, I think he has to have a really good jump shooting run, I think he has to be the best defensive player on the planet.
Yeah.
Moreover than anything else, it's going to take Anthony Davis reaching his absolute apex come playoff time for the Lakers to get this thing done. We know what LeBron can do in this age. We know how he impacts the game at this age. I think it's about Anthony Davis taking that leap and doing it consistently, moreover than anything else.
I think you're right, and I did love this offseason and really everything that they've done since the trade deadline. I bought into that Lakers team after they made those moves as somebody who could contend out west. I predicted them going to the Western Conference Finals, and they've just gotten significantly better now when they have more continuity. This team is no doubt more talented top to bottom than the bubble team that won the title. Offensively, it's not even really close. The difference is LeBron and AD were reliably top 3 players on the planet in that run. It was a different level of LeBron, and it was a different level of AD offensively, the best version that we've ever seen of him offensively. How reliably can those guys reach that ceiling is the key, and how good can this team be offensively? Because I like the skill improvements in the supporting cast a lot. They are still going to need that star level takeover, that consistent imposition on the rim, that elite LeBron playmaking, that dominant AD rim finishing. This was a below average half court offense last year, 40th percentile. And I just think it's really tough to win titles that way, regardless of how good you are defensively, especially when you're going up against an offensive juggernaut like Denver that I just don't think you can take away what they do. The NFL season is going strong, and DraftKings Sportsbook is hooking new customers up with an offer that's even stronger. Bet $5 on any game this week to score $200 instantly in bonus bets.
And DraftKings isn't stopping there. All customers can take advantage of a sweetener offer every game day this October.
Get in on the game day greatness. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code NERDS. New customers can score $200 instantly in bonus bets when you bet $5 on the NFL. That's code NERDS only on DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. The crown is yours. Who do you have next in this division, Logan?
You know, this may be one of my hotter takes. I'm intrigued to see where you have them. I've got the Golden State Warriors at my number 2 spot, and I have them going 50-32. I think the Dubs are maybe the most slept-on team coming into this next season. I think the Warriors are going to be a lot better this season. Primarily, Again, you have a top 3 player on the planet in Stephen Curry. And again, I've apologized for this numerous times since the beginning of our playoff content at the beginning of last season, Yeah.
But just one more time. Come on.
Yeah, I'll get into it. A bald fella like myself ranked Steph as... outside the top 10, man, it was egregious.
You had him as the number 10 player you wanted for that playoff run behind the likes of Jason Tatum, Joel Embiid.
Who's this? Who's this jackass with the mic, man? What an egregiously bad take, dude. Up there with one of my worst ever. Steph's the top 3 player on the planet. I'm sticking to that from now on out. I would take Jokic, I would take Giannis over him, but Steph is number 3 for all the things he does offensively on this team. I feel like you saw it during the last playoff run if you watched. Wiggins missing all that time with the family matters, comes back, is still, I think, the Warriors' second best player, but it's just a little bit out of rhythm, can't reach the level that he needs to, along with Clay, to get this team over the hump. It was Steph going to will. It was Steph going to work. Making crazy shots, doing everything offensively. Well, we're going to have Wiggins, hopefully, for the entirety of this season. I think he's criminally underrated still. I think he is this team's second best player. He's a great athlete. He's a great perimeter defender. He's a great hustler and rebounder. And when he's on, his shot is pretty nice. Him just being on the floor matters a great deal more. Andrew Wiggins is a really good number 2. Another reason I expect this team to improve is the upgraded creation outside of Stephen Curry. Carson, it's a luxury that the Warriors have not had in the Stephen Curry era, really at any point. I think you'd have to go back to, Barbosa or Livingston, and even that I don't think compares to.
They did have Kevin Durant for 3 years.
I'm talking about in terms of star talent, but you get what I'm saying here.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that as disrespectful to Jordan Poole, too. He was imperative during the Warriors' title run, but I think this is the best creation they've had outside of Steph, in terms of outside of the star play. It starts with Chris Paul, and I think that you have lineup versatility. You can ask who's going to start. I really don't think it matters. You just have 6 really good players. They're going to rotate in and out. Him and Dre will come in and out of the lineup. You got a little versatility there. So CP is really going to help with the bench unit. And CP's not a star anymore. He's not a great point guard anymore. He's just really limited in terms of how he can score the basketball, and that limits what he can do for your team. But he's going to make the right decision. He's not going to stop the ball within the flow of the offense. He can get to his little elbow shot, which is still kind of valuable at this point in the league. And he's a smart playmaker. You just can't take that for granted because, look at what the Warriors have had in years previous. It's nobody. Yeah. Their offense goes down the toilet when Steph isn't there on the floor. And I really think the Podziemski kid is a great draft pick, man. I've been super impressed with him in the preseason. And you said it in the pre-draft process. We talked about it after the draft. I don't know what we're going to get out of him defensively, but I really don't care. He gets it offensively, man. I can't really define it, but he just has such a great feel for the game. He's unselfish. He moves the rock. He has great vision. He knows where the ball needs to go. For a rookie and for a team that has, again, not had any sort of playmaking from their bench, that's a huge upgrade. So whatever run he gets, I think he brings really good creation outside of Steph. And then the other reason I think the Warriors could be tangibly better next season is the improvement that we see out of Jonathan Kuminga. In the preseason, Kuminga's at 26, 6, and 3 on 55, 47, 76 splits. The jumper's been falling. He was a 60th percentile spot-up player last season. And when you look at his build, his profile, that's the ideal player that Kuminga is guys are creating looks for him, and he's either knocking down the open jump shot because the defense gives it to him, or he's taking a jab step, he's taking a pump, and he's getting into the lane. I think we've seen him do a better job at that. Now, granted, I think that is partly due to because teams don't respect him. They will drop, and they will give him that look, and his jumper's still a little hitchy. I don't know if we can actually see a lot of improvement from that, but any improvement is enough for the Warriors. He's 39% on pull-ups off the dribble last season, and he's a really good cutter. So, I mean, if Kuminga takes a real leap or if Moody takes a real leap, that's another, box checked for the Warriors. So, I think they're on my title contender cusp. I think it would have to be an ideal scenario. I mean, everything I think would have to be perfect for the Warriors to win the title, but I see the path. It's superhuman Steph. It's the supporting cast playing up to their absolute apex. That's Klay knocking down jumpers. That's Dre anchoring a top 5 defense. That's Looney dominating the boards. That's CP giving them a ton of creation off the bench. That's Wiggins doing all the little things. And I think that's and I think that means that we need to see improvement from Moody, from Kuminga. And I think Podziemski and TJD need to be impactful. Bottom line is this team's going to be a lot better than last year, and I do have them right on the cusp. I'm not going to pick them to go to the finals, but Western Conference Finals, a little bit of a playoff run, I can definitely see that. But I wouldn't be surprised at all if after a couple months we're going, the Warriors are legitimate contenders. I buy into this formula. I buy into the recipe, and I think they've upgraded from last season.
I definitely think that they are better than last year. I have them as my 4 seed, and I would say that in terms of the playoff hierarchy, they're 4th out west to me as well. I do like the CP3 ad. I think that regardless of what you think about Jordan Poole's talent, the level he was at last year, how erratic he was as a shot maker, but more so as a decision maker, how glaring a liability he was defensively. That's not to say that CP is good there at this age, but just the mental lapses, the complete lack of effort. Poole was not playing championship basketball. And when you have such a limited window as they do with Steph and Klay and Dre and this core aging, you got to go make moves for championship players. And I do think that Chris Paul is that, and he does help remedy what has been a major issue in recent years, and that is the lack of offensive skill and direction that the second unit devolves into without Steph. Those have been killer. We saw it in the Kings series, right, where they were convincingly outscoring them with Steph on the floor and convincingly being outscored with him off the floor. He's still a good pick and roll creator, Chris Paul. He's just so good at manipulating defenders, at working his way into that mid-range area, and he's either going to get the elbow look or he's going to find a way to hit the roller. He's going to create a solid shot, especially against bench units. And I do think that he should come off the bench. I don't know that it matters all that much what the official starting lineup is because it's going to be more about the rotations. His minutes have to be heavily staggered with the second unit because he's just not a spot-up player. He's not an active off-ball guy. He is overwhelmingly effective with the ball in his hands, and so you don't want to have him out there with Steph. You want to have him out there with the less skilled offensive unit, but I think that they're too small if they go with a backcourt of him and Steph. I think that they want to be starting Dre and Looney. That makes them competitive in the front court physically. And I still worry about them matching up with really big athletic front courts like LA. I think that Denver's size is going to be a problem. If it's CP playing with the starters, then it's too much of a disadvantage. But I think the second unit overall is better. You have GP2 for a full year again. He's an awesome Swiss Army knife winning basketball player. I do love Podziemski offensively. I think his shooting and his passing ability so seamlessly fits in to this offense. And then he's also got really nice pick and roll feel and a beautiful floater game, so he can work on and off ball. I do worry about him being attacked defensively, but I love that offensive skill. And Trayce Jackson-Davis, I thought that he was one of my favorite value picks of the draft, and we talked about that. Finding depth bigs has been a challenge for the Warriors, especially any sort of athletic, rim protecting guy. And TJD is still undersized because every Warriors big has to be undersized, but he does bring that rim finishing. He does bring rim protection with his athleticism. He has really impressive playmaking feel. I think he's a pro-ready guy. I mean, he's 23 years old, so he should be. I like him as a potential rotation piece, and if it's not him, then Saric is another good depth big who is going to bring a new floor spacing look. So I think they've done a better job of building out this roster. I like the depth more, and they've maintained all of the foundational pieces, but I do still have a couple of the same fundamental concerns. I do worry about the high-end creation alongside Steph. I worry about defenses just singularly focusing on him, and the Lakers are a uniquely gifted defense, but their ability to key in on Steph, to make anybody else beat them, even as Steph was dictating offense out of pick and roll, I think was concerning in terms of the level of offensive skill that the Warriors have outside of him, especially when they're playing their two big looks, which I think they need to survive defensively. And Looney and Draymond are both good basketball players, but it makes things more congested. It makes them that much easier to guard. And that's a reality. That's a limitation that this roster has. And CP, as much as he might help the second unit, I don't think really helps the starting five in a meaningful way there. And either way, I'm just not sure that they have the firepower of what the Lakers can impose physically with their duo and now much improved shooting. Again, the Nuggets to me are just in a different tier of effortlessness because of how much Jokic can impose his will on the paint. And then he has this great perimeter skill around him, an awesome rim finisher in Aaron Gordon. The Suns are just overwhelmingly skilled in terms of pull-up shot making. The Warriors, to me, are so much more reliant on Steph and more limited in the other areas compared to those contenders out west. And then I do worry about the size, athleticism matchups. We saw the Lakers eat the Warriors alive in those categories. And I think that the Nuggets are also huge, are a dominant rebounding team, have a super athletic forward in Aaron Gordon, and a 7-foot unstoppable monster in Nikola Jokic. So I just don't know if they've solved those problems. I do think the Kuminga leap is an interesting swing factor here. He's an insane athlete, and I've been saying since he was a prospect, one of the most unique athletes in the league, one of those guys who blends good first step with just insane aerial athleticism and strength around the rim, and you see it in preseason. He is just going through people, but I do still worry about his handle. I think you see that even in preseason, losing the handle in traffic too much as a driver, and I need to see the shot for more than a 3-game sample. And yeah, he improved as a three-point shooter last year, but overwhelmingly that is being left open. I agree. When he can really either knock down an open catch and shoot three or attack a closeout reliably, I like what Kuminga brings, but I just think we need to see it more consistently. We need to see more refinement. I still think he can be a black hole. He can take the offense out of rhythm with some of these isolation possessions. He's still not going to make a bunch of good decisions as a playmaker. He has the tools defensively, but isn't always dialed in mentally. He's just still a project to me, and I wouldn't bank on them taking a meaningful leap in their ceiling because Kuminga progresses. This is a guy who in playoff settings, they haven't wanted to play. So how much of a leap can you expect? Not when you're talking about his individual skill, but talking about what the Warriors are gunning for, and that is title contention. I'm not super high on that, and I think it's much more likely he takes a leap than Moody does. I feel like Moody at this point sort of is what he is. So I do like the Warriors. I like them more than last year, but when I look at a team like the Lakers, the elite two-way ceiling is clear. The Nuggets are in a different tier with offensive production. The Suns, honestly, I think are in a different tier with offensive production too. So the Warriors do fall to fourth out of that pack for me.
So do you have the Suns above them as well?
I do.
That's interesting. I have the Suns as my third team in the Pacific Division, and I don't know. It's a question, really, Carson, of, are they going to be able to play defense? That's my only concern. You talk about these teams with elite two-way ceilings. And while I don't think Golden State has a super high-end defensive ceiling because they're really relying on Draymond Green, and there's not a ton of other great defenders around them. Wiggins is phenomenal, but you don't have a high-impact rim protector alongside Dre. He's one of the best help side guys. It's a tall ask for Golden State to take that leap. For Phoenix, I just really wonder if they're going to be able to play defense at all because, we can talk about the offense. They're going to be great. When you have this amount of talent, it doesn't matter. We can talk about the pull-up jump shooting, how reliant they were in the playoffs. Mm-hmm. It's ridiculous. 54% of the Suns' shots came from the mid-range area. 34% of them from the short mid-range, 19% from the long range. It's absurd. I mean, by far the most of any team in the playoff field. And so you can talk about them getting stale, right? They're going to figure it out. Bradley Beal's going to put a little more pressure on the rim. I think they're going to find a rhythm and a flow to the offense. I think they're also going to tell Beal and D-Book, and KD for that matter, we need you guys getting downhill, opening up looks for other people, being more dynamic. It's what killed them in the playoffs. And also, the two-point pull-up is just not a super efficient shot. So when you're relying on that primarily, you can get killed by a bunch of threes. We saw that in Denver, man, when they got blown out in a couple of games because every possession Denver's manufacturing an open three and they're manufacturing pull-up jump shots. Bottom line is, with Bradley Beal, with Devin Booker, with Kevin Durant, with the floor spacing here, with Yusuf Nurkic, they're going to figure it out offensively. That's not where you have to worry about the Suns. It is completely on the defensive end, and I just can't buy in there. That is why I have the Suns, and this may be, again, another hot take. I have them winning 47 games in the regular season, 46. They're going to be my 7 seed.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a tough division. The West is super tough. I like some teams in the North, or I like a couple teams in the Northwest division, but it overarchingly comes down to I just don't know if this team's going to be able to defend well. I still think this is going to be a bottom 10 defensive unit. KD can lock in. D-Book can lock in. They don't have an impactful rim protector. I think Yusuf Nurkic sucks. Defensively, that is. There's been a narrative going on social media, Carson. I know we briefly discussed this when the trade came out, that Nurkic is somehow a good defender. That's preposterous. And down the line, I like some of the point of attack guys that they have here. I like Nas Little. I like Keita Bates-Diop. I like Grayson Allen and Josh Okogie as guys that can be serviceable defenders, but they're not guys that take this defense up another notch. So, look, I mean, if the Suns can reach an average defensive level, if they can be somewhere between 15 and 10, yeah, they're legitimate contenders. I put them in the same tier of contender as the Warriors, but I just buy into the Warriors' identity in two-way ability more than Phoenix. Phoenix can have the offensive advantage all they want. I'm going to take the better two-way team 10 times out of 10, and that's just what I think Golden State is. I just think they're a better two-way team. I cannot buy in to the Phoenix Suns playing good defense right now. I just need to see that before I can really buy into the Suns as a high-level contender. So they're in that next tier for me with the Warriors as, backup contenders on the cusp of a finals run.
I think that they're maybe in that same tier with me in that I prefer both the Nuggets and the Lakers, but the Nuggets I see like the guaranteed elite offensive foundation. The Lakers I see the guaranteed elite defensive foundation, and I can reasonably see them reaching high levels on the other side of the ball because we've seen them do it before. The Lakers have an improved offensive supporting cast. The Nuggets actually defended quite well in last year's playoffs. The Warriors, I trust them to be good on both sides of the ball, but I think it's going to be an uphill battle for them to be elite just because they don't have the most complete stacked rosters on either side. And the Suns, it's more of that imbalance where I think that they'll be great offensively, and I think that they will be scrapping to be average defensively. And it's hard to win a title that way. Generally, you have to reach a really, really high level on both sides of the ball. But I do just want to give them props for doing a phenomenal job of building out this roster. You say, and I think we agree, the Lakers maybe had the best overall offseason when you're talking about multiple moves, not just something like trading for Dame. But in terms of doing so with really limited resources, the Suns balled out, man. Adding Grayson Allen, adding Eric Gordon, adding Yuta Watanabe, adding KBD, adding Eubanks in one offseason, not even including the Ayton trade for Nurk, which to me is more of a lateral move. That's really impressive. They've put together a good second unit. There is shooting there. There's athleticism and length and rim protection in the front court. if you always have one of your star creators with that second unit, which they absolutely should, I mean, that's going to be a pretty damn good second unit. And for a team that I thought depth was going to be a concrete weakness, it's improved dramatically. Now, what they do lack beyond the top three is that reliable, really high impact guy, right? Like, do they even have dudes who are going to be in the Rui, Wood, D'Lo tier on their really good nights? Do they have guys in the Clay, CP, Looney tier? Probably not. And so that is still a concern. But it should be a really good offense just because they have one of the best pure scoring trios ever. And the fit is solid here. They all have off-ball skill as catch and shooters. Beal is a very good cutter. Book is solid there. But they are predominantly on-ball players. A significant percentage of their usage normally comes out of pick and roll. And if not that, then isolation. So it is going to be an adjustment there. I do think there's some redundancies. And as you said, the tendency to fall into these stretches where they're incredibly reliant, not just on pull-up shooting, but on pull-up mid-range shooting is very real. None of them are elite rim pressurers. Book was 75th in terms of restricted area field goals made last year. KD was 150, and Beal, the best of the bunch, was number 27. So they're going to be elite offensively. And I mean, they were damn good offensively in last year's playoff run, even with less overall offensive talent, less shooting skill. Instead of Bradley Beal, it was CP3 out there they were relying on as a third option, who had the same exact limitation, but just way more so in terms of not being a really high-end rim pressure and wasn't good as a scorer in really any other way. They were still good offensively, but they had too many lulls to reach that true contending tier because of their limitations defensively. And I like what Nurk brings offensively because I think he's a really good short roll decision maker. He has the touch as a paint scorer. He started to stretch out the floor a bit more this past year. He still doesn't provide that dynamic rim finishing, so that dynamic of the offense is still missing. And I do worry about them reaching a really high three-point shooting ceiling in the starting lineup just because Beal, Book, KD, all those guys, yes, they're good three-point shooters, but again, catch and shoot, flame-throwing performances isn't what they're known for. Okogie is going to be hot and cold and mostly cold as a shooter, and Nurk has a little bit of that, but it's not his preference, it's not his strength, and that just limits the sort of insane runs that you can go on when you're trading in those threes, potentially, for twos. It's still going to be a really good offense, and defensively, I think that they'll be okay. Like, I think that engaged Book and KD and Okogie, those are all good defensive wings. Okogie and Book at the point of attack, KD with what he can bring as a secondary rim protector. Beal has good length. He has good size for being the smallest guy in your starting five. I do still think he'll get targeted. We've never really seen him defend at a high level, so I wouldn't expect that. And then the lack of rim protection does matter. There are things to like with Nurk defensively, like he's super strong and can hold his own in the post, and he's a really good defensive rebounder. But when you struggle to guard in space, and you're a lumbering, slow-footed big, and you struggle to protect the rim because you're not a dynamic athlete there, you can only impact the game so much as a five in today's NBA. And as I've talked about before, he doesn't have the sort of elite hands, elite defensive IQ that can make a guy like Jokic more serviceable. So I do still think the two-way foundation is shaky. I think the offense isn't as unstoppable as like the Nuggets, which puts them in a different tier. But I do think this is a really damn good basketball team, and I am extremely high on Book and KD as a duo. I think they can go supernova, and maybe there's a level they can reach where this team goes all the way. We saw them reach a ridiculous level in last year's playoffs, especially Book, but KD's still dropping his 29 a night on solid efficiency. The rest of the roster just wasn't as good as this year's. It's really not close, but I still have the Nuggets and the Lakers above them. Those are more complete teams.
Yeah, and I certainly wouldn't count out the Suns becoming a contender as the season chugs along. Let me ask you this on that front. So you mentioned, you know, the depth here is shaky. What is the deciding factor for you and why you have the Suns above the Warriors? What's the distinction for you?
Well, I don't really think that the depth is shaky. Again, I think it is the really high impact fourth, fifth guy you can rely on night in, night out. If you're looking at like 7 through 9 on this roster. I think it's actually
No.
really good. I think it's
I'm
improved.
I'm talking about those high impact role guys. Yeah.
The difference to me is that they have an overwhelmingly dominant offensive big three and 2 of the 10 best players on the planet. 2 guys who are capable in any game of both dropping 35 on you damn efficiently, of reaching as high a level as pull-up shooters as anybody. And we've seen the playmaking as well. KD had a really good playmaking regular season. Book, we saw it in the playoff run, when they are bringing Jokic in those sort of hard hedges, forcing him to beat you with skip passes, reading the low man. All right, that guy's planted in the paint. I have to make the toughest pass in basketball, basically, a skip pass to the weak side corner with Nikola Jokic's arms waving in my face, this big dude with a 7'6" wingspan. He was making those passes. I saw somebody after I had my Book over Tatum take say that Denver was able to neutralize Book's offense by forcing him to make those skip passes. And I'm like, no, they weren't. First of all, look at his production from that series. I don't know if you're familiar. It was insane. And second of all, he was making those passes. Book is a good playmaker. I think an underrated one. I think he'll continue to show that. And when they have shooting skill alongside them, I mean, that was part of the problem last year, is they just didn't have a good shooting supporting cast. So it's about that duo. And then what Beal can do. I don't know that he is reliably going to have all-around star impact night to night because of some of the defensive limitations, but he's still a lethal scorer of the basketball, a very versatile killer scorer. That, to me, is just so much more reliable than the Warriors having some of those same issues, struggling to pressure the rim, lacking the dynamic rim finishing to complement Steph. Again, not having guys who are going to attack at a really high level off the bounce, having some shooting inconsistencies. I buy into the Suns' offense being elite reliably.
No, and you're right. I mean, in a one-game scenario or, a few possessions, you're exactly right. Steph could go cold and the Warriors' offense dies. You can legitimately have 2 guys on the Suns, and I don't think that's realistic, Beal or Book disappearing for a night or something, but you got KD, and vice versa if one of the other guys dips out. So you make a good point, and I'm really intrigued to see, because Carson, I think that's the biggest swing thing with the Suns is, one, the defensive ceiling they can reach, but also if we see any of these role players prove that night to night they can be counted on to produce. If it's 12 to 15 points a night, the KCPs of the world, the Bruce Browns of the world are going to put you over the top and get you to the promised land.
100%.
I'm really intrigued to see who on the Suns bench and depth-wise here can step up and take on those roles.
Who is your favorite guy of all of the ones who they added in this offseason?
That's a good question, man. Honestly, as much as I hate him, God, I hate him. Grayson Allen.
Yeah.
I despise him. I've hated Grayson Allen ever since he hit that fake buzzer beater on UVA. It was early January. I was watching the game with my father. Grayson Allen, unfortunately, traveled. He took off and took a jump shot. Well, actually, 2 things. He traveled. His foot hits the floor. Get this, Carson. Before he gets the jump shot off, and time expires. The refs, of course, he hits the jump shot. They give Duke the victory. And he's, a fan of tripping guys and doing dirty things. So I'm not the biggest Grayson Allen guy, but he's going to step in here and I think play a pretty valuable role. You mentioned it in the playoffs last year. Spacing off of the ball handlers was such an issue. Okogie not being able to reliably knock down shots. And you think about what that does to the opposing defense. The guy in the corner who's on Okogie can help off on the other guy on the wing or can slide down to the paint. Hopefully that is not as big of an issue with added spacing. If Okogie's bricking, if he's shooting 24% from behind the arc, by Okogie, you're going to the bench. We're going to put a legitimate floor spacer out here. And that really matters. So I think Grayson Allen, because of his two-way ability, is it Allen for you? And if it's not Allen, who else do you like down this roster?
I think it's probably Allen. I mean, that level of dynamic shooting is really valuable, but Yuta is an elite spot-up guy. I do like Eric Gordon because he brings the spot-up ability, but then also has the ability to drive as that bulldog to the rim that he is, and has some defensive tools that he can tap into when he has incentive to be engaged. But I really like this entire second unit, man. I mean, Eubanks, I think, is an underrated rim protector and a reasonably skilled finisher on the interior. He's not going to do anything crazy. And then Keita Bates-Diop, man, had such a good year. I mean, this is like a strong, physical, really long, good, versatile defender who's added a more reliable jump shot to his game, a solid rim finisher, good athlete. Like, they did a good job. They did a really good job. And maybe some of these dudes aren't the biggest names, and they're not probably going to be like KCP level impact, right? They're certainly not going to be MPJ, Aaron Gordon, whoever you think the Nuggets' fourth guys. That's a meaningful difference. That does matter. You're absolutely right. Like, if you look at the champion last year, the Nuggets had 6 damn good basketball players who they could rely on every night, or at least they could rely on 5 out of 6 of them. And the Suns still aren't at that level of a complete roster, but it wasn't possible for them to get there. They did the best they could, having given up all their resources to put together that big three, and I do respect them for that, and I am excited to see them this year. Let's take a quick break to talk about Verizon's new offer. For a limited time, Verizon customers can get Netflix and NFL Plus for just $25 a month with Plus Play. That's $120 in annual savings.
Plus Play is a platform where Verizon customers can shop, manage, and save on the subscriptions they already love, like Netflix and NFL Plus. With NFL Plus Premium, you get access to live games on mobile, NFL Red Zone, and NFL Network, and more.
Just go to Verizon.com/plusplay to bundle and save on Netflix and NFL Plus today for a limited time only. Who do you have next in the Pacific Division, Logan?
I have my Sacramento Kings next up in this division, and the question I've been pondering during the preview, I have the Kings, for reference, right behind the Suns, 45 and 37. They're going to be my 8th seed. The question I've been pondering about the Kings this season is, did they reach their apex last year? Is that as good as it's going to get for Sacramento in the Mike Brown era? And I know it's very early to say, right? And I feel it's wrong of me to finally have a good season and to be pessimistic heading into the next year. But I can't separate the logic part from my heart, right? I want to say that the Kings are going to take that next step. They're going to win 50 games. We're going to see improvement from a lot of these young guys. Fox is reliably going to be a great pull-up jump shooter. Sabonis is going to space the floor, right? I want to buy into these things, but a lot really went right for the Kings last season. And there's still one side of the ball that they really fall short in. So one of the biggest swing factors, like I mentioned, is going to be Fox's shooting. He shot 44% on pull-ups, 34% on jump shots, and you see the difference in the offense, man. Out of the pick and roll, he's so fast, so shifty, so great at getting downhill, you have to respect it, which means that pull-up jumper is ultimately going to be there in almost every matchup that he draws because you have to respect him as a driver. He's going to blow by you. He's going to get to the rack, so you're going to let him shoot that. If Fox can be 38% on pull-up jumpers or around there in the mid-range, that's okay. That's good. But to be a great offense, he needs to be better than that, and he needs to just be more consistent because you see it in spurts. In that Warriors series, he is killing Golden State. He is lighting them up. They don't have an answer for them. And then towards the last few games in that series, he goes cold, and so does the Kings offense. A part of the Kings offense going cold in that series was Domantas Sabonis. In the regular season, you see it. They're running every action through him, every possession. They're running offense through him, and it's easy. It's seamless. But in the playoffs, the Warriors said, nah, we're just going to drop off of Sabonis. We're going to let him shoot. And the game you went to, I still remember, I mean, Sabonis felt like he missed 7 or 8 elbow jumpers. Those are mid-range jumpers, man. That's warm-up. That's JV. So I think the offense can take another step up if Sabonis is spacing the floor out to three-point land, out to mid-range reliably. Because you can't have that in the playoffs where teams can expose that. That's the margin of losing and winning in the playoffs, is something as small as that. A guy not being able to shoot. If you can exploit one thing, that could be the difference between you winning and losing a series, and I truly felt like that was the difference. Sabonis disappearing and being a complete zero in that series, Looney completely X'd him out. He bodied him on the post. Sabonis couldn't make touch shots down there on the low block, and he couldn't hit jump shots. I mean, took him out of that series completely. That's another big concern with the Kings for me. The other concern is health. As everybody mentioned, the Kings were the healthiest team in the NBA last season. That matters. But obviously the biggest concern is the defense. They had the 25th ranked defense last season. And why are they going to be better there this year? I can't tell you why. Sabonis is still a negative as a rim protector, as a defensive five, as an anchor of your defense. There's not really any great point of attack guys in the starting unit. I like Davion Mitchell off the bench. Davion's going to get like 20 to 25 minutes of burn a night. Not enough to make a meaningful defensive impact, and he's a guard. So at the end of the day, a point of attack guard is not going to transform my defense single-handedly, even though he's a good asset to have. So, I like some of the moves that they added. I like adding in Chris Duarte. He had a down year last year, but I buy into him being better as a jump shooter, as a ball handler, as a pull-up jump shooter. I buy into Vezenkov coming in here and being a really good four and a floor spacer and adding, a dynamic to this offense that they didn't have. Another crafty passer, another good decision maker, another great cutter off the bench, more floor spacing. That's great. Colby Jones, I think, is going to be a good pick-and-roll ball handler off the bench if they give him some burn. He's a guy that I really liked out of the draft. And ultimately, this is going to be a great offense. Number 1 ranked offense last year. They led the league in handoffs per game at 10.2. They were the second most efficient offense out of handoffs. They averaged 9.8 cuts per game. That was the third most in the NBA, and they know how to move that pill. They were fourth in the NBA on total passes and total assists. So what am I saying here? The offense is going to be great again this year, regardless of if Fox can hit his pull-up jumpers at the clip he did last year. They're going to be a great offense regardless of if Sabonis can stretch the floor and can be great against difficult matchups. But the bottom line is they didn't really improve dramatically anywhere, so I don't really see how the Kings can take that next step until they prove defensively. And it's disheartening for me because as a Kings fan, I want to tell you that the leap is coming. But I really wonder if what we saw last year was the ceiling. I hope it's not. I hope Fox takes another leap. It's asking a lot. I just don't see it. So I have them winning 3 games less than last year. I have them winning 45 games and creeping into the playoffs as my 8th seed. Do you have the Clippers above them too? Because I know that a lot of people are onto the Clippers as a dark horse, finals candidate again. I don't really buy into it, but are you with me? Do you have the Kings in your 4 spot, or are they rounding up the rear for you?
I do for the regular season. If I had an expectation the Clippers would be healthy for most of the year, I would have them above them. And if it comes down to a playoff setting, I think the Clippers are in a different tier because I think the level of dominant shot making you get from the wings with Kawhi and PG when they're healthy, and the playmaking and the shooting supporting cast. And although I don't love the Clippers' defensive ceiling, I do think it's still significantly higher than the Kings.
Oh, yeah.
But when it just comes to winning regular season games, I think the Kings have a more reliable formula, but just barely. I have them winning 46 games as my 7 seed, and I think you hit on the key point. How do they get better from last year when everybody had career seasons? But even more so than that, they were like the healthiest team in the league. Their entire starting 5 missed 21 games combined, Logan. In the year 2023, that is inconceivable. And for reference, Kawhi and Paul George alone missed 56 games. LeBron and AD alone missed 51 games. Steph and Wiggins alone missed 71 games. Devin Booker alone missed 29 games. So yeah, the Kings are young. Some of those other guys that I've mentioned have histories of being banged up, being injured, and are much older. But that sort of disparity is ridiculous. That was an incredibly fortunate season for them and an unfortunate season for some of the other teams out west who now have significantly improved their rosters, who have maybe had time to develop more synergy and continuity if they put it together at the deadline like the Suns and the Lakers did. And it's like we always say, if you didn't get better in today's NBA, you effectively got worse. They should still be elite offensively. I mean, they have some of the most brilliant offensive design in basketball. I love the use of handoffs. I love the off-ball movement, the creativity there. I love Sabonis in the regular season as a hub, all of the playmaking value that he brings. And Fox downhill, Malik Monk downhill, the overall shooting ceiling. They're going to be really good. Will they be the number 1 offense again? I'm not sure, because again, Fox had a career year, Sabonis had a career year, Kevin Huerter had a career year, Malik Monk had a career year. They have some guys who could be trending upwards, but do I think that Keegan Murray is going to take a big step as a shot creator on ball? I don't. I thought he already did a great job in his role as a big-time shooter last year. Davion Mitchell, I love his point of attack defense. Offensively, I still think the jumper is going to have inconsistency. Just where is the leap coming from? I do really like Vezenkov. I love the spacing. I love the post scoring. I like that he brings some of that Sabonis-esque playmaking, so you can run some similar offense with the second unit through a playmaking big. But none of these guys are game changers. None of these guys are raising the ceiling in the way that some of the other offseason additions we're talking about could. And the defense still just holds back their ceiling. This was the number 25 playoff defense. And I honestly thought that they hung in there reasonably well. Or excuse me, number 25 regular season defense. They hung in there reasonably well in the playoffs. They competed, but they're just limited athletically. And they do not have any sort of real rim protection. So they're going to continue to struggle there, and you can't really contend when you are at the level they are at defensively. Their offense is going to make them a tough out for anybody. I do want to see Sabonis add his offensive skill because we saw that exposed. We saw Looney just parked in the paint. Hey, Domas, why don't you make some 16-foot mid-range jumpers? Why don't you knock down a wide-open catch-and-shoot three? And he couldn't do it. You know, he knocked down 2 threes in the preseason game against the Warriors, and that was what the halftime interview was about. But I am going to need to see a lot more than that to believe that he has really added to his shot making ability. And even out of the post, we saw him overly reliant on pure physicality. He got lulled into a lot of offensive fouls. He limited them and he hurt them in the playoffs. And also he just sort of got punked. I mean, he got worked on the glass. He couldn't have an impact defensively. So I just feel like the same limitations are going to hold them back in terms of taking a leap. And with the health luck, they will not be that healthy again this year. I hope that they are. I wish that everybody in the league could be, but it's just not realistic to expect. And so I do feel like they are a team that is going to regress a bit, but they're not a team that I could knock out of the playoffs entirely, because having an offense that is that elite, that I do still believe in, this was the best offense in basketball last year. If they're not top 5, again, I will be disappointed. That is a really reliable avenue to winning a lot of games in the regular season and at least putting yourself in the playoffs.
Big time. I am with you, though, on the Clippers front, that if we could bank on health and come playoff time, if the Clippers are in there, I think they are in a different tier. As it goes for the regular season, I have the Clippers as my 9 seed, so they're going to be in the play-in with a record of 42 and 40. So all of these teams in this division I have above 500. But the biggest thing is going to be health. Kawhi, 41 games played per season since joining the Clippers. Paul George, a whopping 48 games played per season since joining the Clippers. And, you know, I think it's, you know, what are we going to see out of them? And the only reason I ask that is not because of what we've seen in years previous. I think it's the best versions of Paul George and Kawhi Leonard arguably we've ever seen. Paul George has made strides as a playmaker, as a pull-up jump shooter, as a decision maker. Kawhi Leonard is a stone-cold killer when he is on the court. You just can't stop him. He gets to his spots. He does what he wants. You can't stop him when he's healthy. But that's when he's healthy, and you just can't bank on that. Outside of those guys, I wonder about the reliable offense and perimeter creation. I like Norman Powell. I like Terrence Mann. I don't know how great those guys can be. Overarchingly, my issues are more probably with athleticism and rebounding, stuff like that. This is an undersized team. They got bullied by the Suns. And you know, Carson, I really wonder what the direction is with this Clippers team, because the rumor is, you know, I think you're at a bit of a crossroads, and I don't really know what you do here other than push all your chips in on this season, because I don't really know what's, you know, there in the future. You know, the rumor is that they're going to get James Harden, or Harden wants to force his way to L.A. I don't know what assets you're giving up to go and get James Harden. If you don't do that, the alternative is you ride with this core and you hope that you have a really good regular season and can get into the playoffs, don't have to go through the play-in. But the window's closing, and it's closing fast, man. Kawhi Leonard and Paul George have player options next season. This is the 5th season of Kawhi and PG, and all you have to show for it is 44-win seasons, a Western Conference Finals appearance. That was PG putting the team on his back. And you gave up SGA, a bona fide top 10 to top 15 player on the planet, depending on where you rank him. You gave up him 5 first-round picks and 2 first-round pick swaps to get him. So, you know, I know the vision. Build around Kawhi and PG for the next however long as we move into, you know, our new stadium, our own home turf. But I don't know, man. It just seems like they're kind of stuck in the middle. Shout out Jimmy Eat World, man. You're just stuck there, right?
Stuck in the middle with you. Different song.
Shout out
That's
Elvis.
not the Jimmy Eat World song in the middle.
But, I just don't know what you do because I don't really see this team as a legitimate contender because I can't trust Kawhi and PG and all the other issues that are around this team. But you don't really have another option because you don't have first-round picks. You don't have assets for the next coming years to replenish and to get young talent in here to help compete. So I don't know, man. It really seems like the Clippers are at an impasse, at a crossroads right now, and the only decision that it seems like is on the table is to go all in on this season and to try to win a title.
Well, what do you think about that? Because I think that they need to commit hard in one direction or the other.
Yeah.
I do not think that they are going to trade Kawhi and PG. First of all, those guys' trade values are going to be at all-time low, and I think this is a team that really is committed to being competitive, and they have gone in on this core up to this point, but I think they need to go a step further if they want to be taken seriously as contenders because of some of the defensive regression with their supporting cast aging, because of some of the limitations in terms of really good point of attack defense or really athletic secondary rim protection. And I do still want them to have another star creator. Somebody who could bring that traditional point guard-esque playmaking presence would be great. I think that fills a hole in this offense, but even more so just to have a safety net, just to have a guy who can go out there and give you star production if Paul George or Kawhi Leonard is hurt in a playoff run. And it's just not going to take that much to get James Harden. Like you're asking what the package is. I think it could be a combo of Batum and Morris and Rocco.
What?
And your 2028 first. Well, obviously you have to throw picks in there. What is the market for James Harden?
Do you really think Daryl Morey is doing that, man? I think Daryl Morey is clutching Harden with his life until he has to give him up.
But isn't there a point where you have to look in the mirror and say, yeah, I might say that we'll ride this thing out as long as necessary, but are we going to just fumble a year of Joel Embiid's prime when he is already pissed off at us? And realistically, there isn't a great market. There is one team that anybody is talking about, and it's the Clippers. And even if it were somebody else, even if the Heat were to become engaged in these conversations, what's the great asset that they have? There isn't a great package.
Do Batum and Covington move the needle for you for Philadelphia?
Not really. I mean, I would want Terrence Mann, but Terrence Mann's apparently untouchable.
How? That doesn't make any sense.
I do kind of get it, partly as just a leverage play, I'm sure, but also they are going to have to decimate their wing depth a bit if they do get Harden, because they have to move multiple mid-sized contracts. And although maybe none of these guys are great in a vacuum, they all have to play. Like, they are relying on these dudes for decent minutes, and Mann is the best of the bunch. Mann is certainly the highest impact two-way guy at this point. He brings the most playmaking. He's a good shooter. He's the youngest.
Do you think Bones has any value?
Not really. I don't think so. I mean, what Philly wants, I would assume, is high-impact wings. Two-way guys who can shoot the hell out of the ball, and the Clippers don't have perfect versions of that. Mann would be the best, but they have some decent dudes you can throw in there, veteran guys who can make winning basketball plays, and then they do have the first down the line. They can throw in a pick swap. It's a disappointing haul for James Harden, but good luck getting a star back for James Harden or getting a really intriguing young player. Not going to happen. It's not going to happen, Daryl. You're not turning Ben Simmons into James Harden again, and guess what? Even when you did do that, it bit you on the ass. And I don't think that Harden relationship is being repaired in Philly. James Harden certainly doesn't think it is. So I would go for that if I were the Clippers. But I don't think that's something that we see happen very soon, because clearly both teams are going to try to hold out here and get the best value that they can out of the other side. But this is still a really good basketball team when Kawhi and PG are healthy. I don't think that they're quite as good as they were a couple years ago, because I think the supporting cast was better. But last year when both those dudes played, they were 24-14 in the regular season. When they were on the floor together, they had a net rating of plus 8.9. And I think Kawhi is still a top 5 player when he's healthy. I think what we saw from him post All-Star break, once he was back in rhythm, dropping 27 a night on 66% true shooting, was ridiculous. And then in the playoffs, 2 games, 35 a night on 67% true shooting, soundly outplaying Kevin Durant. There is a different level of physical imposition with him. KD may be one of the greatest pull-up shooters that we've ever seen, but Kawhi is able to get to those short mid-range looks. He's able to use his physicality in isolation situations, in post-ups, and get to the point where those may still be mid-range looks, but they're 50+% and they're incredibly reliable. He can get there over and over and over again. And then he does have the lethal pull-up shooting. He has progressed as a playmaker. There are few dudes to me who elevate their game more in the playoffs than Kawhi Leonard. We've talked about his production over the last runs really since even 2017. If you look back to, he's 30 plus a night on ludicrous efficiency, and he does that every time he gets there. I think Kawhi is the man. I think he may be the most underrated dude in terms of just how they stack up at their healthiest, because he might be 4 for me after Jokic, Giannis, and Steph. Who else is that unaffected by the playoff scenario in any way? Like, you can make Luka's case offensively, but he was so bad defensively. Embiid, I still think regresses too much as a jump shooter, as a playmaker. Physically is prone to breaking down there as well. Of course, that applies to Kawhi. But if we're just going healthy to healthy, Kawhi has dramatically outperformed Embiid in those scenarios. AD is too unreliable offensively. Tatum, I think we see too many of the stretches where his playmaking crumbles. He's relying on just these pull-up shooting runs, and sometimes those go really south for him. He's not a reliably great pull-up jump shooter. You never see Kawhi falter like that. You really don't. So he is special. But what's the probability that he's going to be healthy for this entire year? What's the probability he's going to make it healthy through an entire playoff run? It's just not very high. I do want to shout out Zubats outside of the top 2, just because I think he's gotten to the point where he's a good defensive anchor, a damn good rim protector, and offensively, I mean, he's one of the throwback bullies where he's got great touch out of the post, and he's super big and strong. And I will say, I like Russell Westbrook here more than I thought I would, because I was opposed to that move to bring him in. I thought, well, here's a guy who isn't going to have off-ball value. He's going to be a problem defensively. You don't want to take the ball out of PG and Kawhi's hands just to let Russ do his thing where he's going to shoot you out of games and have too many turnovers and all of the bad stuff that he's capable of. I do still think there's real downsides there. And I think Russ is very divisive. I think some people are still too high on him. But there's no question that he looked better with the Clippers than he did with the Lakers, significantly so, because he's got awesome spacing here. He's got lots of open lanes to attack. When he draws help, he's got really good shooters to kick out to. Everything in LA was congested. It just was not a good situation for him whatsoever. He's getting more open threes off ball, and people are leaving him, but he was able to hit them at a decent clip in the regular season. 16 a night on 56% true shooting with them down the stretch in the regular season. We saw him take on a bigger role in the playoffs, and he had a couple dynamic performances where the pull-up jumpers were falling and he was pressuring the hell out of the rim and playmaking at a high level. And then we saw a 3 for 19 performance in game 1 where he actually defended his ass off and still had a positive impact there. But then game 5, do or die spot, he goes 3 of 18. It just happens too much. I do like that he adds that dimension of rim pressuring and of playmaking, because Kawhi and PG at this point aren't consistently getting downhill like that. And Russ is a better playmaker, and that's valuable to have. More dudes who can create and who can create in different ways. But is it reliable enough? Is he good enough at it consistently to outweigh the bad decision making? The fact that I still don't love his value off ball because of his limitations as a shooter. The lack of self-awareness and the willingness to have those 3 for 19 games that can shoot you in the foot. I just worry about that in big spots too much for me to be like, oh, Russ is a home run here. I think that there are going to be really good moments and really bad moments, and that's the reality of the experience. And then I do worry about the regression of this team defensively. They were the number 17 defense in basketball last year, and they are getting older. Nobody is trending upwards. They don't have great point of attack defenders. As I said, they don't have great secondary rim protection alongside Zubats. Kawhi and PG at this point are very good individual matchup wing defenders. But as off-ball team defenders, they're not the most impactful guys in the league, and I just don't think they really have those guys. So this team has too many flaws. At full strength, yeah, I'd put them above the Kings because of the Kawhi PG factor and because they're better defensively, but they're still firmly below the Warriors. They're still firmly below certainly the Suns, the Lakers, and obviously the Nuggets. They'll push anybody. They'll make it tough on you, and they can have these nights where, I mean, we've seen it before. They can be an elite three-point shooting team and manufacture those looks from the perimeter consistently, but do they have the offensive variety in a way that I can bank on it? I still don't buy into that totally, and we've seen that hurt them in the past, that reliance on the perimeter shot making. And I'm worried about the defensive regression. And bottom line, they're probably just not going to be healthy when it matters most.
Yeah, well said, dude. That's why, to me, the bottom line, I think the Clippers have to go out and make this James Harden deal. It's still an issue with this team. They don't have a reliable, good decision maker, a playmaker who can set the table for everybody else. But I also think you're right. I think they need somebody who's a little more volatile, who can explode for those big games and those big moments when they need it. And even if they get James Harden, like you said, I still don't think it addresses all of their needs enough to, where I legitimately consider them as contenders. So,
yeah,
mostly due to health and regression. Yeah, they're at the bottom here. Here's for it, man. Kawhi Leonard at full strength is one of my favorite players to watch in all the NBA, man. He's awesome.
Yeah.
And I hope this is finally the year, man. I'll knock on wood. I'm not going to bank on it, but I will remain optimistic. Load management doesn't work, man. Maybe Kawhi should try it one year. Just play like 70 games. See what happens, man.
I fear that we will never see that ever again. But peak Kawhi, dude, he is so special. I mean, it's, to me, clearly one of the 20 highest peaks that we've ever seen in the sport. And when he is playing basketball, I think you can't overstate how great he still is. It's remarkable. But the poor guy just cannot stay healthy. So this division is insane, man. I'm so excited for all these teams, not just because they're all going to be good and some of them are going to be great, but because there's a lot of change here. I mean, there's a lot of retooled rosters with significant additions, and it's just going to be a very fresh, fun experience. And I'm hoping for health luck for all of them, because it'd be a bummer for any of these teams to be taken out of the picture, like we've seen happen, unfortunately, too much in the past. If it's the Lakers getting banged up, obviously the Clippers, it's liable to happen every year. I want to see all these teams at full strength. This can be a special NBA season, and this division can be at the front of that. So, if you guys enjoyed this one, as always, appreciate you. If you want more Nerd Sesh content, you can find it at the Volume YouTube page. All of our full shows are there with video. You can also listen to the podcast across audio platforms. You can follow us across social, TikTok and Instagram at Nerd Sesh, Twitter at Nerd_Sesh. You can join our Discord. That is at the link tree across our social media bios. If you just want to be part of our community, talk football, talk basketball, whatever it may be. You can also buy our merch. That is at our link tree and at thevolume.com. Logan's wearing the shirt. We've got hats. We've got hoodies. We've got the flags behind us. So you can check all of that out. And with that, as always, I've been Carson Brabber.
I've been Logan Camden.
And this was Nerd Sesh.